Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Bystrak. I'm the Superintendent of Schools for the West Seneca Central School District, and you right now, if you're watching this, you're tuning into the second of what are going to be three different parent forums discussing the reopening of schools for the coming school year. Joined with me tonight, I have Mrs. Persico. She's our Assistant Superintendent for Educational Operations. We have Dr. Quinn, the principal of Allendale Elementary, and Mrs. McCartan, the principal of Clinton Street Elementary. They're going to be helping us out with some questions pertaining to elementary school and schedules later on in the, the discussion here. So first, I just want to thank everybody for joining us. The last time we did one of these forums, it was over at West Senior High School, and we actually had scheduled it a couple of weeks earlier, and we did have some people in the audience at that point. We invited some representatives from our parent-teacher groups from across the district. That was actually the second time that we had done that. And I actually did receive some questions to an email address that we have here talking about, how parents were selected. And we just felt that, considering that every building has parent-teacher groups, we thought that that would be an accurate way or a good way to be able to, solicit, input and, provide people an opportunity to ask questions that would be very equal across the district. So that's just to answer that question. That's how we ultimately made the decision to involve the parent-teacher groups. This evening, we don't have anybody in the audience here, except for folks watching at home. I'd also like to thank Mr. Jeff Pacer. He's helping us to man the cameras tonight too. So I think I just, for the benefit of those that may not have been able to tune into the to last Wednesday's forum, I just want to be able to set the stage a little bit and kind of give a little bit of background and a little bit of, history up to this point. I'll be brief, but just to talk a little bit about, why we are where we are at this point. So obviously everyone, in the district and really in the country knows that last spring schools were closed. New York State, it happened in March, and really they haven't reopened yet. The governor has given schools the okay to reopen, come September, but you have to do so safely, and we have been provided a great deal of flexibility in terms of how school districts will reopen. So just going back to some of the history, initially, as we were closing out the last school year, we were discussing plans for the upcoming year, and there was the realization, across the state and across the country that this pandemic wasn't going anywhere for a little while, so that we were going to have to make some adjustments in terms of how our educational program was going to be operating. Initially, the guidance that we were going to be receiving from New York State was going to be coming out in mid-June of 2020. And for really, I would say, no fault of anyone's, it just, it took some time to be able to get that guidance out. Ultimately, it came out right in the middle of July. We were given a couple of weeks with the actual parameters in place to develop some plans because there were some pretty, critical items that we needed to know in order to be able to effectively plan for the coming school year. And I will say since that time, and again, this is through no fault of anyone's, I believe, but there was clarification, a number of different clarifications were issued regarding the guidance that for schools to be able to reopen, some of them very substantive in nature, to the extent that it basically within about a week of the guidance coming out, we realized that we were not going to be able to, along with other school districts in the area, we're not going to be able to bring all of our students back at the same time. So at that point, there was another model. There were two other models that we were to plan for. That was the hybrid model, which kind of basically what you would do essentially is split up your student population in some way, shape, or form, and then the fully remote model, both of which are acceptable. And I want to stress that. It's not often that the New York State Education Department provides the kind of mandate relief or the kind of flexibility in terms of how you administer your educational program in such a manner. But they, I think, in recognition of the magnitude of what we're dealing with right now, have given us a great deal of latitude. And they've said that fully virtual instruction absolutely counts towards, for schooling, and it basically enables us to continue to receive things like state aid and support from the New York State Education Department. So as we waded into the idea of a hybrid model, we started looking at some of the logistical issues. And at first, said, okay, you're cutting the number of students in half. That makes sense. We can do that. And we even ended up reducing by a little bit more. What we quickly came to realize, though, and again, as new guidance emerged, is that there were a number of logistical hurdles and safety hurdles in terms of trying to be able to provide a solid educational program within a safe environment. I will say that in considering, two major factors that have contributed to our district's decision to be able to open up the school year in a fully remote model. Now, make no mistake about it, we are beginning the school years. Classes are going to start on September 8th for our students, but it's going to start in fully remote model. Two major areas of consideration contributed to that. Number one, health and safety, as it should be. That was the first consideration that we had. And in our district, we have over 1,000 employees. We're going to be bringing back, during the school year at full capacity, there's about 1,000 people on our campuses. And there's a lot of moving pieces that go along with that. We were concerned about bringing students and introducing students into that mix because there's a number of parameters that had to be adhered to in terms of things like students, people, not just students, maintaining 6 feet of social distance away from one another. This was going to require an enormous amount of time for students to be doing things like transitioning between classes and staggering transitions or staggering entrance into schools, taking temperatures. All of these things are going to cut into instructional time. So, which kind of goes into the instructional side of the house. So there was the safety concerns, ensuring that that we're making sure that we're following the CDC's guidelines and the Department of Health's guidelines. But then the other side of it is the instructional side. We had a hybrid model. We have a hybrid model that we do. It's on our website. You can take a look at it. It involves students essentially being in school a couple of days a week in person, and then another cohort, the other half of the student body, being in attendance another couple of days a week, with one day in between that we were utilizing for quite a bit of planning on teachers' parts, because again, we're kind of building the plane in the air as far as any kind of a hybrid model is concerned. And so you'd have half the students learning in person, half the students learning remotely. That posed some challenges in terms of educational equity, and we were very concerned that we would, in trying to service the two populations at the same time, that we would be serving no one to the extent that they deserved to be served. So from our perspective, that's when we started shifting toward the idea that a fully virtual model would offer, have the opportunity to offer a more coherent and a more consistent model of education with regular daily student interaction with teachers. And when I say daily interaction, I'm talking about substantive and meaningful interaction with teachers. The whole idea that students are going to be expected to, we're first of all going to be tooling up students with Chromebooks, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, so that they have access to their teachers remotely, also helping families that are lacking in internet connectivity. So, again, accounting for that as well. So creating the venue for our students to be able to interact with our staff was critical, and we felt that we could accomplish that. So then the next step is developing the program, and I feel that we've developed a comprehensive program that will address our students' needs. If you look at our website, the basic shells are up there. We actually have some schedules for the secondary level. The elementary level, I will say, is a much more nuanced conversation in terms of just what a schedule would look like, because you have such a wide variety of developmental levels, all the way, you're looking at students that are in kindergarten, and then you're also looking at students that are in second or third grade. So you can imagine the difference that exists between those two levels. So, and you also are looking, you have to take into consideration factors such as kids at a younger level may have some difficulty accessing their technology independently. So they're going to need a little bit more parental support at home. So that's where those schedules tend to be a little bit more, I will say, fluid in some regards, but also we want to make sure that we are flexible so that we can meet the needs of our parents and caretakers as well. So, so we actually have a number of questions that people have been emailing in over the past week. Actually, we created an email address. People have taken full advantage of that and have asked some phenomenal questions, which we want to be able to address. So I literally went through and wrote down focus areas and questions that I will be addressing. So just to answer a couple of them right off the bat, and then I would like to, the reason that Dr. Quinn and Mrs. McCartan are here is to speak to the elementary level, because there's been a number of questions, very good questions I might add about that, and they're going to be able to talk to us a little bit about the elementary scheduling model, in addition to maybe just kind of describe maybe what a day in a life might look like a little bit for some of our elementary students, as well as our teachers and as for our families. So one thing I would like to address, we did put out a time frame of about Thanksgiving. We had said, parents, families, make arrangements, plan on this to last probably through about Thanksgiving. That's not a hard deadline. That's not even a deadline. Frankly, we put that into place because we know that parents have to plan. As you'll recall, last spring when schools were closed, the governor, and again, this isn't a criticism, it's just a reality, was closing schools in approximately 2-week chunks for the most part. It made it very difficult for schools to plan, for families to plan, and the collective wisdom of our leadership within the district, including our Board of Education, we said, you know what, let's just tell people, plan out, I don't know that anybody's going to be upset if we're able to bring our students back in some way, shape, or form a little bit earlier, but we want to be able to essentially test the waters. I started off by saying that we're starting the year in a remote model. We're starting the year in a remote model because we want to be able to get our staff in to be able to basically get comfortable with some of the protocols and procedures that we have in place. It's going to be critical that we are adept at remote learning, because whether you're in a hybrid or fully remote learning is still going to be called for. So we need to be good at it. And I think, I'll be honest with you, there was some concern that people had expressed that last year was a little less structured than they would have liked. And maybe I'm being generous with that statement, but it was because we were in survival mode, as all districts were. And I will tell you that what happened last spring in terms of the way that we were able to approach our educational programming and what's going to happen this fall, day and night, there's no comparison between the two. Number one, we weren't one-to-one. We didn't have enough devices to be able to account for all of our students, nor did we have any mechanism really to provide them with additional internet access. Our staff, our teachers didn't have any kind of coordinated effort at training in the Google Classroom. We were using any different platform that we could, some of them very effective platforms, but there were too many. Parents were giving us feedback. There was just too much information coming from too many different directions. So what we did, we made the decision we're going to use Google. And what we did was provided our teachers with training right before school let out. Everybody got a basic level Google training over the summer. We have a teacher center, one of the larger teacher centers in the area, actually. A lot of other districts utilize it. But they had difficulty utilizing it this summer because our teachers soaked up those courses that were offered. There was a robust catalog of courses within the Google Classroom. And different levels or different kind of functionality of it. And they were, I think, within a couple of days, I was just speaking with our teacher center director yesterday, within a couple of days, all those classes were filled up because our teachers are hungry to get this information. And then there's also, I've been hearing about a lot of people that have just been going out and taking it upon themselves to enhance their learning. So that learning doesn't stop. We're going to continue to provide training and professional development for our staff right in through the school year. Right with a digital learning plan as well. So, I mean, we're taking a lot of steps. We're enhancing our capacity to be able to help our students, or to connect with our students remotely. So I just want to be able to say that. And one of the other questions, too, I'll just, before I turn it over to Dr. Quinn and Mrs. McCartan is, a couple of people have asked, what is it going to take for us to move into kind of the next phase where we start bringing some students in? I think it would be inappropriate for me to give out some sort of arbitrary time frame. I can talk a little bit about some of the conditions that I think we would want to exist. And frankly, people are saying, well, your infection rate's low in the area. This is more, from our perspective, we're still being told that the guidance says that we need to be, socially distanced and take all these safety precautions. But the things we're going to be looking to do is to see how can we bring students in a gradual manner. So that we can work with them. If we have to make changes to our protocols, how can we do it in a way that is, we can be nimble, right? If you have a lot of kids in a building, it's tougher to make changes. You've got all these moving pieces, whereas if you have smaller numbers, it's easier to make those changes and say, okay, well, what have we learned here? And then gradually build on that capacity. Some folks have asked, well, who would you be thinking of bringing in first? And I don't have any hard answers on that because that's going to be a decision that's based on, our folks, our educators getting in their spaces together and assessing what capacity we have. I will throw out a couple of suggestions. I think, what I would say we'd be targeting most likely would be students that might have a higher level of need, potentially students that require special education services. There was talk of, do we bring in students that require like related services, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, bring them in for those therapies to start. Try that out a little bit in a very controlled and strategic manner, with the appropriate safety protocols in place. Is that day one? No, that's after we're in for a little while. And then, are you all then looking to bring in students with those higher level of needs, possibly in some of our self-contained programs where you have like a student in a smaller classroom, or possibly our English language learners, or even kindergartners? I mean, just trying to identify who benefits most, or who is really most in need of the in-person instruction. So, but again, we have this capacity, I believe, to provide a solid educational programming remotely. We've been given unprecedented flexibility from the New York State Education Department, and I think that's an important point to make, that we should take full advantage of that flexibility. And I think that our plan to wade into the waters as opposed to plunging into the waters is going to allow for a better start to the school year. I said this last week, you only get one start to the school year. And I would hate the thought of starting off the school year and then having to come to a crashing halt because of something that didn't go well and then having to restart again at a later date or having to go right into that remote model kind of on a bad note. So with that said, I'm going to take a drink of my water because I've been talking quite a bit here, but I was going to turn it over to Dr. Quinn and Mrs. McCartan, maybe just to talk a little bit about the elementary model of our remote programming. And again, thank you for being here.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Bystrak, for letting us come and just answer some of the questions that we've been hearing from some of our parents. So one of the first questions that a lot of families have been asking is, what does a schedule look like for elementary students? As you know, if you've been an elementary parent and you get your little weekly schedule of what happens, it's much more nuanced for elementary students. And a lot of the days revolve around reading, writing, phonics, math. So that will be a large component of students' daily interaction with teachers. And our curriculum for science and social studies is much more holistic. So we try to infuse those topics into our reading and writing as much as we can. But the largest part of what will be happening for your students and is part of the workshop models that we run is really small group and individualized instruction, where students are able to confer with the classroom teacher or in small groups. So that will be the largest part of what's happening. Some of the instruction will be live, some of it will be taped for families, and really the special areas that your students are used to seeing the PE teacher throughout the day, or art or music, will also be incorporated into their daily schedule. But I think the biggest thing, correct, Dr. Quinn, is that it will mirror a typical day, and you will receive a schedule of what your child will be doing every single day. But every single day, will look a little different depending on the needs of your individual students. But teachers will be sending a specific schedule for that first grade class that they're part of. So I think that's one of the most important things that will be occurring.
Yes, and I know specifically a question was asked about what will special areas look like, and as Ms. McCartan said, they will be a mix of synchronous and asynchronous, which means that some activities will be available that will be posted that you can go on and access for your children or child, and then some will be live. There will also be opportunities where the special area teachers will be partnering with the classroom teachers to do combined activities. And again, all specials will be provided for students just as they are when we're in session. So they will still have art, music, gym, library. The fifth graders will have chorus. Fourth and fifth graders will still have access to lessons. So all of those components will still be part of their schedule, and they will be included in the teacher schedule. So when you get your week at a glance schedule from your classroom teacher, your specials will be included in that schedule so that you know which specials to expect that week and whether the sessions will be live or they will be activities that you can go on and access.
Right, and I think that's probably one of the largest concerns that we've been fielding from families is we understand how enriching those activities like music, art, and all of those are important to round out a student's day. So a lot of parents have also been asking us, what if a child can't necessarily participate during that schedule? What can a parent do as part of that? So as Dr. Quinn said, some of those things will be synchronous, some of them will be asynchronous. So parents will be able to have the flexibility to do some of those activities with their children at a time that's more convenient for them. So that will be a huge part of the elementary programming.
And one of the things that we are looking into is opportunities whenever possible to tape lessons. So even if a lesson is live, if it's able to be taped, that would be available in your teacher's Google Classroom, so that if you're a working parent and your child's at daycare and there's some reason why you can't get on to a live meeting that's scheduled at a specific time, you still as a family have the opportunity when you're able to assist your student, because as Mr. Bystrak said, we understand that our younger students are going to need some support from their parents, and so we will have those available to you so that you can go on when it works for your family and you can access those lessons and those opportunities. And that actually aligns with another question, which was how will attendance be taken? So the elementary principals have been working very closely as a group to make sure that we're all in alignment. And one of the things that we've talked about is obviously a concern for all of our elementary parents is that, what if you are not able to access, the Google Classroom when something is going on live? So for attendance, even though attendance does have to be taken every day and there's an expectation that students are participating every day, we will have assignments, and it doesn't have to be a difficult assignment. An example may be for a primary student that there's a Google assignment available that a teacher places early in the morning that asks them to talk about the weather, how are you feeling today, something that you can do as a family anytime throughout the day, and it will be accessible first thing in the morning, but you will have the entire day to complete it, and then the teacher will go on and check the next day or the following day and give you credit for attendance. So the expectation for attendance is that you go on at some point during that day with your child or your child independently if they're one of the older students, and they complete the activity that's been placed there by the teacher first thing in the morning. So that's how we're going to be taking attendance at the elementary level.
And the next couple questions, I'm going to tie a couple of pieces that Dr. Quinn was talking about. We know that meeting your child's teacher is important, but we also understand that it's important that we understand what your particular family situation is like. So I'll start with that first. That the elementary principals, and we've been working with our teachers we want to know where your child is so that we know if they are with grandma and grandpa on Monday, that we have to kind of adjust our sails to what your particular needs are as a family, but also making sure that we're maintaining the best educational opportunities for your children. So there will be a survey that will be coming out from each building that will have more granular details specifically about you, your child, and what their day looks like so we can better tailor and meet your individual needs. Along with that is that idea that, when we left in March, you knew who your child's teacher was. And we understand that that's an important part of the beginning of the school year, is being able to meet your child's teacher, that they know your child as an individual, that they get to know their class. So we are working on ways to, virtually as much as possible or with some safe social distancing to be able to have you meet your child's teacher. Believe me, the teachers want to know who your children are as well, just as much as you want to know about them. So we're in the process of finalizing class lists so that information will be available very soon to families, but we understand there's nervousness on both sides. That's just typical beginning of the year jitters that happen, but we want to get everybody off on the right foot. So they want to meet you and your family as much as you want to meet them. So we will be scheduling some opportunities. I know like the high schools have already been doing that, and we will be doing that for our students as well very soon.
Another question that was asked was a question regarding kindergarten screening. Typically, we have kindergarten screening take place in the summer for all of our incoming kindergartners. Obviously, due to the school closing, students cannot be brought into the building at this time. However, we don't want parents to be concerned because our teachers are constantly assessing their students, and we have built-in opportunities, even in a virtual platform, for teachers to continue to assess their students to determine, their skill level, their needs, and what direction they need to take their instruction in. So they will continue to do that.
We think that the other important part, too, is not just the meet and greet, but you have opportunities to reach out to a child's teacher and that you know when that is on a daily basis. So along with a daily schedule about when they will be kind of running their day with reading workshop or math or those pieces, there will also be scheduled office hours that teachers will be holding. So at least this way, they'll be able to it'll be a specific time every day that you'll know when those will be happening, that you and your child can reach back out to the teacher if you didn't if your child didn't understand a assignment or things like that. And I think the big thing just about really the educational program that we feel I think this is at any level, that it really needs to be a gradual release of responsibility type of environment, that teachers are modeling a lot of what they are expecting children to do, students to do across the district, and that there's a lot of time spent together, that the teacher models it, the students show what they know, so that they can successfully go off and do those activities independently. And then those office hours are built in, that if they didn't necessarily understand it or they're not as independent as possible, you as families know when you can reach back out to the teacher, because the teachers won't be readily available during the middle of the day because they'll be doing all of their small group instruction and individual instruction with students. So I think that that's an important component for parents to understand, that on a daily basis, teachers will be able to be available to you in a scheduled period of time that you can kind of follow up with them.
And another question that's come up quite a bit is the elementary schedule. And we know that it's very different and Mr. Bystrak has spoken to that a little bit about the fluidity of it. And it's very different from a secondary schedule in that we don't have set curriculum and blocks, because we're trying to work at the pace and the need of the students. And so we try to be flexible about what their needs are. However, each teacher will be creating their own schedule. So you will get a schedule every week. It will be called the Week at a Glance schedule. They will send it out ahead of time so that you do know what they're going to be working on. One of the things that Ms. McCartan mentioned that's important to keep in mind is that, especially at the primary grades, more so than the intermediate grades, is that it will look different at the beginning of the year. So at the beginning of the year, as with every year, but more so on a virtual platform, we will be building structures, protocols, procedures, things that you may also need to be a part of with your child that you typically do not need to be a part of because you're typically with the teacher. But these are things that will be that slow, gradual release where they need to take the time to show them how to work in a virtual classroom, how to accomplish the tasks that they're asking them to accomplish, how to participate, a different set of classroom rules and maybe expectations because you're learning virtually instead of face-to-face. So they will be working through that. The younger the student is, the longer it may take to get those things in place. The older students may be able to move more quickly through it. So the schedules are going to look different at the beginning of the year, and then they will gradually become more and more curriculum driven. So at the beginning, the first few schedules you see may be more about procedures, protocols, building that classroom environment and capacity for them to be able to work in this environment, and then slowly more and more curriculum will develop. So just so that when you get those schedules, kind of what to anticipate is coming your way. But you will get schedules from teachers based on the grade level your child's in and based on the needs of your child and the children in that classroom. That is how they will determine how they group students, how many groups they have, and how that's going to be configured.
And I think along with that is we need to get to know your students, especially a brand new teacher. So I think you have a bird's eye view to everything that goes on in an elementary classroom on a daily basis. So you're getting a real feel for what teachers are doing on a daily basis. They're constantly assessing kids. They're constantly reviewing rules, policies, procedures to build that learning community. So that is going to be a large part of the beginning of the school year, that the learning community has to be built. Whether you're a 12th grader at one of the high schools or whether you're a kindergartner in one of our buildings, that sense of community has to be built. Students need to know where they can find resources, materials, especially at the elementary level. You also need to know that. So we are really looking to build partnerships with you. That, not that you are the teacher, but that you can make sure that your child is as independent as possible doing the activities that teachers are working on. And I think that's going to be a huge part of what is happening, particularly those first few weeks of school, is building that sense of community, and that everybody is very patient and graceful with one another throughout this whole event. I have to tell you that I think Dr. Quinn and I can easily say that there is no elementary principal book that you can pick up that says, okay, how are we going to do remote learning during COVID? So I think trust and patience and understanding one another that, this is all new for all of us. And, we have been working very hard. The teachers have been working hard. We've been working hard to make sure that some structures are in place, but as we all know, nothing is perfect, so it's going to take a little time, especially for the youngest students. Parents, your partnerships with us and getting to know your child's classroom teacher is going to be very, very important moving forward.
And communication is key, obviously. So if you have questions, concerns, please reach out to your classroom teacher directly. If you still have concerns, you absolutely can reach out to the building principal, the social worker. Any resources that we have in the building are available to you. We're still all there in the building every day. If there's something you need, resources, I know that that's come up as a question as well about, printing resources. We will have those resources available for you. If you need resources, we're not asking you to try and print them at home. But if there's something you specifically need or your child needs, please reach out to the teacher, one of the building principals, the social worker, anyone you need. We absolutely want to keep that communication open and make sure that everybody's getting what they need.
And I think some of those questions, like I know Mr. Bystrak just shared with us, like about twins being in classes together, those are more specific to each individual building. So we really encourage you to reach out to us so we can answer some of those questions.
Great. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking the time to articulate that. And I guess to add to your point a little bit, this is going to be a fluid and evolving situation. It really is. So how we start off the first couple of weeks, I think if we set in firm protocols in place with our students and expectations for online learning, it's really going to set us up for success later. And that's really no different than any other school year. Any teacher worth their salt is going to spend a great deal of time establishing routines, protocols, and really modeling for their students what the expectations are going to be. So I appreciate you taking the time to be able to talk about that. And again, I think as both Dr. Quinn and Mrs. McCartan had indicated, this is an ongoing conversation we're going to be having. So we encourage people to reach out as they have questions. And I think once this is a little less abstract, once the year's underway, I think this will make more sense because everything we're dealing with right now, really, it hasn't been done before. So, we have a good idea as to what we want to be able to accomplish. We have a good idea as to how we're going to accomplish it. That said, there's going to be some changes. Things are going to evolve. One of the questions we received was, why did you ask parents if they want a remote learning option if you were just going to offer just that was going to be the model of instruction for everyone? It's based on emerging guidance. It's based on emerging information. So at the end of the day, we're going to have to continue to adapt, and things are moving quickly. Guidance comes out quickly. Things change within our community and our country quickly. So, and I want to just circle back for a second too. One of the questions that because when we did put out that survey to say if anybody was interested in remote learning, that we'd be asking you to commit for the year. There's a variety of reasons why that would have been an appropriate step to take. I'll, in the interest of time, won't get into too many of them. But somebody did ask the question. Okay, so let's say that we find ourselves able to go into some sort of a hybrid model where students are back in person, and it's whatever month it is. Someone had asked the question. Well, would we still have the option of being able to maintain in a fully remote model of instruction? The answer, I would say, would be yes, barring any change in the guidance, because the guidance currently requires us to offer that opportunity for anybody that does not feel comfortable returning. So if the guidance changes, then that answer may change. But the other part of that is, would we consider potentially, saying not for the rest of the year? Well, considering I don't know that it's likely that we're going to be in a hybrid model, right away, obviously not right away at the beginning of the school year. I think we could revisit that on a situational basis. So it's not a hard no, you got to commit for the year or whatever. I would think we'd have some flexibility, but we want to see what the circumstances are and what the conditions are. So I guess to answer the question, yes, we absolutely would be open to revisiting that. So we've designated till about 7 o'clock tonight, and we have a number of questions that have been emailed to us. And just out of respect for the people that emailed those, I wanted to be able to go over some of those questions. Mrs. Persico, our assistant superintendent, also has a laptop pulled up, and she's currently, if anybody's emailing in questions to that email address, she's going to be able to pull some of them up for me as well. But I do want to start, I guess it's first come, first serve. I want to start off with some of the questions that have been asked since our last forum. So. And I apologize if they may not be in perfect order, but I just tried to put them in somewhat sort of categories. So So one of the questions that we had was a child care update. So last week at our forum, I indicated that I was going to be participating in a conversation, a group conversation with the Child Care Resource Network of Western New York, and I did that last Friday. We did have some conversation with local superintendents, as well as this organization, which is more of a clearinghouse and a resource that, like kind of a referral agency if you're looking for child care. I'm not going to say there were any hard decisions made or any firm decisions made at that point in time, but I can tell you that there's definitely, it seems as though, well, we know that this is an issue throughout the community. I don't have an update to say we have this option or that option, and lights just turned off, but I think that's because we haven't moved in a while. I think the rationale behind that essentially, or I'm sorry, the child care option at this point in time, we're still exploring options. Some had asked, will the district be creating or providing any sort of child care opportunities? There's a possibility we do have to explore. I will say last spring, the governor issued an executive order that mandated us to do that. There are a lot of things that went along with that executive order. There's not currently an executive order for us to put something like that into place, and there are a number of logistical challenges to doing that. But that said, I'm going to tell you that we are exploring options, and also options including, understanding or gaining a better understanding of what the capacity of our local child care agencies is. So I'm just being honest, it's not much of an update at this point, but I'm going to continue to keep our community updated regarding that issue. One of the questions came up too was, and this actually in a number of cases, and I'm very glad to be able to give the answer, people are asking, what if my student participates in some sort of technical or career and technical education through Erie One BOCES, or they're going to a placement for a special education programming somewhere out of the district, or if they're going to one of the parochial schools, will you be providing transportation? Yes, we will. And as far as like the BOCES programming or any of the, basically any of those programs I just listed, we will be transporting students to the extent that the programs are being offered. So I know that Erie One BOCES is currently working out their own plan in terms of how they're going to offer their career and technical education. And I've already been in contact with BOCES, as has our Director of Career and Technical Education, Dr. Merkel. And we will be, if they're offering X number of days per week, then we will be transporting our students X number of days per week to the BOCES program. So we want to make sure that our students have the full access to that. And as I said last week, different schools and districts and agencies have different capacity than ours. And BOCES, I anticipate, will be running some sort of a hybrid model for their career and technical education. If they're equipped to be able to do that, then I feel confident in my colleagues throughout the area that that's an appropriate place for us to send our students. So I think Dr. Quinn and Ms. McCartan just alluded to this, but one of the questions was, will staff be in the building? Will we have our teachers in the building? Yes. So the answer is yes, and that's not something that no one's being dragged in kicking and screaming, I can assure you. Staff want to be there. I can tell you that we have the full support. People need to be there, and yes, are some people going to have some issues with childcare just like everyone else? Yes, but we're committed to working through that. But we do feel it's important to have our staff in the building for a variety of reasons. There's access to resources, materials, the ability to more easily collaborate, obviously at a safe social distance, but to be able to work together, it's very important that we have our staff in the buildings. Another question too, and actually you guys hit a lot of the high notes, but I believe this was addressed as well, at least for the elementary level, is materials distribution. So some questions are coming in. Will students be still getting textbooks, or like we do a lot of, we actually have a print shop where we do a lot of our own printing for like spirals, math spirals and things like that, and materials, curricular materials. Yes, we do anticipate being able to put together those materials and get them to our students. As far as how those are going to be distributed, as well as the Chromebooks as well, I will say, because again, we've purchased Chromebooks for all of our students. We're still working out the details with that. We'd like to be able to communicate some of that information in the coming week or so. But as far as the materials themselves, it could be a combination. Initially, I would expect maybe some sort of a drive-through. As we've gotten really good at drive-throughs, but maybe some sort of a drive-through pickup, which also could be an opportunity to meet some of our staff potentially. But throughout the course of the school year too, there may be a possibility that we may be distributing some of the materials using our transportation department. So ultimately it's going to probably be a combination of the two in some way, shape, or form. But yes, the students will be getting access to materials and resources. Some of the questions too were asked about once we do distribute Chromebooks, if parents are having difficulty in accessing the internet, if they don't have good connectivity, we will be sending out a survey to our families. It's going to be a hard copy letter but basically soliciting if they are having difficulty, and then we'll be in contact with those families to help try to problem solve and work through that issue so that our students can be connected. The other issue, too, is, and it was a great question, I thought it was very insightful that the number of people that asked this, but what if we're having some sort of difficulty with the Chromebooks or accessing the technology or whatever it is? We will be creating some structures for our families to be able to receive some support, as well as our teachers, too, if they're having difficulty with the Chromebooks or any of the technology. Additionally, and I think I mentioned this last week as well, but one of the things that we're going to be doing, we have a technology integrator. He's actually one of our teachers, very gifted gentleman by the name of Mr. Jones, who's actually been working with our Mr. Dalbo and Mr. Firkins from they handle a lot of the technology in the district to create a series of parent tutorial videos on Google Classroom, which we're going to push out to our families, but also have on our websites. So that families can access them, and just it's going to be very digestible material, but I think will provide some keen insight for our families to help their students to access their education better. And that's going to be a good venue for us to communicate is through our website to families. So we're going to continue to put materials up there to help our families stay engaged. So moving on to some of the other questions that we have. And these are really in no particular order. I saw them, and I know they're all related to some of the granular type materials. But thinking about the high school level, I love that people are thinking about how do we work through this. Asking about support for students that are starting the college application process. I mean, that's a real thing. We've got seniors and juniors that are thinking about this. The good news here is we have our school counselors. Our school counselors, that's their wheelhouse. And they will be very accessible to our students. And I would actually argue that based on the model that we have at the high school, especially with all the office hours, that they'll be probably to some degree even a little bit more accessible at times because there'll be more opportunities for these conversations to be able to take place. So I'm going to tell you that support is still going to be there. Families asked, what ability do parents have to log into the Google Classroom? And that was a great question. If they want to monitor what their kids are doing, I would say that we want you to be right alongside your children and to really know. I'm going to say something here that probably isn't too prolific, but if you're sitting next to your child probably has a pretty good grasp, depending on how old they are, but on some of the technology. So they're going to be some of the best teachers. I know with my own daughter, who just turned 13 years old, I learn a lot every day from her. So I would encourage our families, to the extent that you're able to sit side by side, you'll have a stronger understanding as to how the technology works. I think it'll provide you a little peace of mind from the educational standpoint, but also from the safety standpoint. Some questions were asked about service requirements. So some students, for instance, like in participation in government in high school in their senior year, or for National Honor Society or National Junior Honor Society or our academies programs, they have, whether it's internship hours or service requirements. I can tell you that in some cases, there's going to be relief in terms of students need to be able to do those things. They may be able to demonstrate that service in other ways. But I guess the important thing that folks should know is that this is something that we know that we're going to need to be able to work through. We'll still work through our plans. This doesn't need to be the first and foremost thing on our minds. We want to get everybody in the educational programming first. But just know that we will be looking to create opportunities for students to meaningfully engage in civic-based activities, especially associated with some of these very important organizations. So this actually goes along as well a little bit with what Dr. Quinn and Mrs. McCartan talked about. A number of parents asked about flexibility for students in terms of accessing their education. And I think what these questions I was getting were more in line with older students or older kids that maybe had to take care of the younger ones. Yes, there will be flexibility. And to some extent, it's going to be, it's a matter of us getting to know your children on a case-by-case basis. We're going to have an expectation that students are logging in. We've compressed the school day a little bit and kind of bookended really at all levels with office hours beginning and the end of the day to a large degree. So students, but like let's say you've got a ninth grader that has to make sure that his younger siblings have breakfast, and getting on at the beginning of block one might be a bit of a hardship for that student. Well, I think the first thing that's going to have to happen is that family's going to have to communicate with that teacher. What happens from there, I can tell you, is that we're going to, we do have some flexibility. We do understand that, the whole idea behind, having the older kids around, one of the benefits is that they can help with some childcare activities. So while we're going to have expectations, we're also, going to be flexible and be understanding of that. But the students are still going to be expected to demonstrate that they're engaging with the material. And I guess to that note too, we were getting questions on grading. Are we going to be grading students? Last year, again, and I'm going to say this fall is not going to resemble last year, but last year we were providing more of a just feedback to parents in terms of grading. This year we're going to be following our district, our board approved grading protocols that we have in place. Now, those protocols do have flexibility built into them. They're inherently built into them, but that's where we're going to be starting from. And I think the important part, I just spoke with a parent earlier about this today, is that our students communicate with our teachers. If there's something they're struggling with or something they're having difficulty accessing, we will use that flexibility that we have. But it is important. The grading process is important. The assessment process is important for us to be able to give students meaningful feedback as to how they're acquiring the skills and concepts that we're teaching. So. One of the questions came down to how will we administer tests and quizzes? Now that's another interesting question. There's a lot there. I think we're probably, to some extent, there could be some traditional sort of tests and quizzes being administered, but we may have to rethink about how we assess students. I think somebody was alluding to they were concerned that a student may not be completely honest and may try to cheat or something on a test, and I guess that's possible. But there are ways to structure tests in a manner that would be maybe it would make it a little bit more difficult to do that. But at the end of the day, we want to be able to assess our students' learning. Again, the grade's important, but ultimately the learning is more important than that. So that's one of those things that when we start to get our teachers together and our administrators together and kind of work through some of these processes, that our collective brain is ultimately going to be able to help us to do that. So I'm more focused on the learning than I am on trying to catch somebody who might not be operating, properly in terms of, using other people's work. So. Another good question too, can students participate in some of this program from daycare? So if you've got elementary students that are at a daycare facility, well, I would say by and large those facilities are going to be, have internet connectivity, and I would say there's probably a strong possibility that those students will have people there that can help at least get them logged on and get settled. But again, the flexibility that Dr. Quinn and Ms. McCartan talked about will still exist. So that really would kind of come down to the daycare. I would encourage families to have conversations with whomever is going to be taking care of your kids during the day in the event that needs to happen, and talk a little bit about what's realistic, and to know that can change and evolve throughout the course of the weeks that come. So questions about when kids are going to get their schedules. So it's coming soon. It really depends on as far as assigning teachers and schedules. One of the things that and I mentioned this last week, we were suggested strongly that we hold off on finalizing schedules right now, especially at the secondary level, because of some of the information management system that we use would make it very difficult to change things in any sort of expeditious manner if we had to make a sudden shift. So we've been able to sort of finalize those schedules, and I would look to see them coming out within the next, we're going to do some fine tuning of them, but within the next, I would say couple of weeks, we're going to see schedules coming out. There will be communications coming out from our buildings over the next couple of weeks as well, with specific information relating to our buildings and expectations. Another great question, will we run all of our classes? And I think what people were referring to in this was like at the high school, there's a lot of electives that we offer that are credit-bearing courses. Students get scheduled into these classes to meet credit requirements, as well as because they're interested in some of these classes. As of this point, we really are working to maintain our full host of programming. And then, another question that was asked as well is, if we were to be able to, move into like a hybrid model, would adjustments have to be made in terms of whether it was curriculum or classes? I think the example that I received was pertained to chorus. So if you've got chorus in a virtual model and students are singing from home, presumably, versus students being in person where you'd probably have to have about 12 feet in distance around you, yeah, adjustments would have to be made. But we are committed to maintaining a sound educational program. This educational program that we have didn't just come from nowhere. It's a culmination of years of experience and community value placed on the programs that we offer. So we really are working very diligently to maintain that program. Some of the questions pertain to some of the hands-on classes, your STEM classes or science labs and things like that. First, I'm going to say that the New York State Education Department guidance actually does give us some flexibility in terms of how science labs are administered. There's certain minute requirements that you have in hands-on activities, and again, some of the I call it mandate relief, but basically some of the flexibility that we've been afforded, that school districts across the state have been afforded, is that, just for science in particular, is that these labs can be provided virtually, or reevaluating how it is that we go about providing students with authentic learning experiences related to hands-on activities. So that's one of the things that we're currently engaged in looking at researching, but also going to be continuing to do that in the coming weeks and throughout the year, really. And again, they stole my thunder again, but Dr. Quinn and Ms. McCartan also alluded to some of the orientations that are taking place. There's an email in my inbox, because I get them all, from West Senior right now. So we are looking to provide orientations to help our students transition into into their buildings at those transition points. Somebody asked a very specific question. They said, can high school students drop classes? So I think this concern was coming from the standpoint of if a student felt as though a class might be too difficult. And this happens every year. We have requests for that. What I would say is you want to communicate with your building. Start with the school counselors. Have the conversation with them. If you're concerned about your child's enrolled in a class, you think they may have bit off more than they can chew, or you just want to make a change, whatever it is, start with them. We do have a process in place. We don't like to just do it willy-nilly, because really it affects scheduling and staffing, and we take a lot of time with these. But if there's a specific concern that you have, then we would encourage you to reach out to your buildings. All right, this one about office hours. Somebody just asked the question, can kids just go to these office hours and I think that the term was shout out, and they just start talking, or are they using a chat feature? I would think, depending on the number of kids there, that there may be some requirement for a chat feature, but I think by and large it's just going to be kids talking to their teachers. And I would suspect in many cases it's going to be kids that are invited by their teachers to be there. It might be Johnny, Susie, and Billy. I'd like you to see it at the end of the day or tomorrow morning at my office hours. I want to work on something with you. So I mean, as far as that goes, I think it's right now we're creating the structure for people to operate within, and then based on the needs of our students in our respective classes, that's really what's going to dictate as to how those office hours look. Another great question too, academic intervention services. So will we still have them? Yes, we need to. The whole idea is what's called response to intervention. So where you have basically a student that might be struggling in any capacity, whether it's in reading or maybe behaviorally, whatever it is, you layer on supports, and you systematically evaluate. As you put these supports in place, you evaluate their effectiveness. We are still going to have the need to be able to have intervention supports for our students, and I would argue that, based on the structures that we have in this remote model, we may have more opportunities for students to access these services without missing classes, because sometimes that's what happens. If a student needs math AIS, unfortunately, sometimes it comes at the cost of another class. So, but with some of the flexibility we've built in, I suspect that will be less often the case. All right. In just a couple of moments, we'll take some questions that are coming in as well, too. So somebody asked questions about musical instruments and lessons. What will specials look like? Well, we already talked a little bit about what they might look like at the elementary level. And I will say that at the secondary level, the kids are running their schedules. So, musical instruments, I know Dr. Merkel addressed that a little bit last week. We're looking to be able to offer our music, programming. So, I mean, again, I'm sorry I don't have more specifics at this time, but I can tell you that that's something we're actively looking into right now, because we want our students to still be able to access our music programming. So, somebody asked the question about the Regents exams and our the New York State ELA and math assessments from grades 3 to 8. So they asked, are they still on for this year? As of this point, they are. We have not been told otherwise. I don't anticipate the state making any announcements right now saying that they're canceled or anything. They were, basically canceled last year. Kids that were enrolled in any Regents classes and actively seeking them got credit for them. That was another question too. What about kids that missed the Regents exams last year? If you have questions, I would strongly encourage reach out to your school counselors. But ultimately, if kids were actively enrolled in a class, they did get credit, and if they were looking as though they were going to pass that class, they did get credit for the exams. So that they won't be required to retake the exams or anything. I'm going to take just a moment to talk a little bit about our special education programming as well, because there's a lot of questions about that too. And I know Mrs. Fowler, our Assistant Superintendent for Exceptional Education, addressed some of them last week, but we will be implementing our special education programming to the extent practicable. And that's one of those areas that I mentioned earlier that would be, as I would like to say, ripe for some, being able to bring students, in person. I think that would be an area that we'd be looking to target first. And I think I mentioned some of the related services like physical therapy or speech, as far as being able to provide evaluations for students. And it's going to be, I would say, especially initially, to the extent possible, we'd be doing some sort of, maybe virtual evaluations. But frankly, there's going to be a need at some point for us to sit down with students in a safe manner and do in-person evaluations. So that's something we will be working toward, and I would anticipate somewhat quickly. As far as providing accommodations for students, and I think some of the questions, and this might be a little granular, but people were asking questions like, what is a consultant teacher doing in this model? Or somebody, a special education teacher, what are they doing in this model? So I have a couple answers. If it's a special education teacher in a class specifically designed for like a set number of students, a 611 or an 811, they're going to be working with those students. But if it's a special education teacher whose assignment is to be working kind of in a general education setting, pushing into classes, they're going to be, we anticipate them being right there along with that teacher. So if it's, for instance, integrated co-teaching services, you're going to have your general, let's say it's an algebra class. You're going to have your algebra teacher. You're going to have the students on the Google Meet, and then you're going to have that special education teacher also on the Google Meet. And the beauty of this, is, at least in my opinion, is that teacher will have the flexibility to be able to pull some students out temporarily if they need to just have some conversation, just briefly, or to have some individualized conversations, with those students. So they're going to be fully engaged in the programming as far as providing accommodations like tests read or, repeating and clarifying directions and things. We'll still have full capacity to be able to do those things for our students. So I want to say that, again, we have a great ability to be able to honor what's on our individualized educational plans for our students, and we fully intend to work to meet those needs because we take them seriously. All right. I do have some other questions here, but I also am being respectful of time. Mrs. Persico, were there some questions, people emailing in as we're here?
We do. Many were already covered by Dr. Quinn, Mrs. McCartan, and yourself just now with that list of questions. But this question is asking if there is an ability for our district to offer building Q&A sessions like you are doing now with these virtual forums.
Gotcha. Okay. So basically, I think what the question is basically to have building administrators possibly having some more targeted questions to their buildings. There may be some opportunity for that. I think we'd have to explore, when that would happen, what time frame. Right now, I can tell you that I think I've got 9 Google Meets scheduled with our teachers around the district, and I've got, a few of these virtual forums scheduled as well. So we'd really have to have some conversations with our building administrators about that. But one way or another, we're going to be able to communicate important information to all of our families on, what it is that, what the expectations for the coming school year are going to be. And, frankly, one of the limitations to doing this right now is I'm reading off a piece of paper and there's not a whole lot of opportunity for interaction on a large scale. So that's where I think some of those individual emails or conversations, picking up the telephone, if we can cover some of the broad topics here in forums like this, I think people's more granular questions are going to be answered through those conversations. So
I think that's where those meet and greets. Sorry.
Yes,
I
please
think
do.
that's where those meet and greets with child's individual teachers, especially at the elementary level, are going to be crucial. And like the high school with the freshman orientations, the middle school orientations that are happening, I think that's really going to solve, will answer a lot of specific granular questions.
Yeah, I would agree.
And along those lines, there are a few questions asking if we will be holding virtual open houses prior to the start of the school year.
Well, the elementary principals have been talking about that because we know traditionally we do something like supply drop-off or kindergarten orientation. So we're trying to, as I said before, we are trying to create some meet and greet opportunities that are either virtual, that parents can come on with the teacher and answer some of those very specific questions about, what's going to happen during the school day where, they're the experts. A first grade teacher is the expert in her field, so she'll be able to answer those questions, or he. But having those opportunities to at least meet the child's teacher, so that will be an important part of that. And in the past, I know at my building and Dr. Quinn's building, we've had supply drop-offs. So creating those opportunities, obviously it may not be a supply drop-off, it may be a supply pickup from you, the families, but creating those opportunities so it's aligning with what you normally know about our schools and our school buildings.
Yeah, and I would just add too that one of the things too is if we're going to be creating these opportunities, we want them to be meaningful. we want you to have a substantive interaction with our teachers and with your child's teachers as well too. So some of that takes some planning, I will say, and school does start in a few weeks. So as far as something in advance of, there's orientations that we're doing right now, and just some of the structures that we're talking about there too. So if it's not right, just before the school year starts, I would anticipate that within the first few weeks of the school year, we'd be looking to create those opportunities as well. So and I know we said this kind of a little while ago, but the whole opportunity, or the idea that the beginning of the school year, the focus, just like in any other school year, is going to be setting structures and protocols in place and modeling for our students what those expectations are, and also creating structures to communicate with our families too, some of which are going to involve some sort of opportunities for some of the interactions being described in the emailer's question. So.
Just another question, and I know it was addressed earlier, but maybe for those who joined afterwards, will the elementary schedule look the same every day? And how flexible is the flexibility if there are parents who work all day and don't get home till later in the evening?
One of the things we talked about earlier was that we are planning to have as much flexibility as possible. So even when there are live meets scheduled, we are looking to have them taped so that if a parent is working and doesn't have the ability to get on and assist their child, or to get their child on because they're either in a different location, or the child, the parent's not there to help them, they will have the ability to go into the teacher's classroom and view something that was done earlier in the day that is taped. Or they'll have assignments that are posted, but they'll have the entire day to complete them, so that there's flexibility with the parents' work hours. So we've talked about that quite a bit, and we know that there is a need for flexibility, especially at the elementary level, and that will be built into a schedule. Will a schedule look the same every single day? Not necessarily, because at an elementary level, we're looking to work with students based on their needs, and there's a lot of individual small group work that goes on, and so there's flexibility in trying to work with those groups and meet with different groups. And so some days you need to meet with one group, and other days you might need to meet with a different group. So there's some flexibility there, which is different than the secondary, where it's always the exact same. But they will receive a schedule. Every parent will get what we call the week at a glance schedule ahead of time, so you will know for the week what the teacher's plans are, who they're working with, what times they're working with them, and they still will be covering all of their content area, coursework every single week.
Right, so those routines and structures will be in place, the idea that reading, will be at the same time, but those small groups might look a little different, will be an important part of what's happening.
Thank you. So just to touch on middle school a little bit too, there were a few questions about the office hour structure, and honestly, very, very, productive, constructive sort of feedback and thoughts on them. One of the ideas was that, could we just put the office hours at the end of each class period and run your full class period, or run your full schedule? I think some of the difficulty, we did actually have that conversation. I know there's a couple other districts that are going to give that a whirl. I think some of the challenges that we were concerned about is connectivity, in just terms of kids. Okay, they have this 10-minute window at the end of class that they're going to try to jump on really quick to this little window of time and ask their questions and talk probably very quickly. I think it'd be very easy for a teacher to have 5 or 6 kids come in and try to all get their questions in that 10-minute period. We thought that if we created the office hours to sort of bookend the days, that it would allow for not only for the questions to be asked, but for some actual intervention to take place, or some instruction to take place. Allows a teacher to sort of assess. I will tell you that if you teach in a secondary building where you have a class, you have your class periods. If you're teaching math, your 8th period math class looks a little different than your 1st period, because throughout the course of the day, you've sort of gotten feedback from students, and it informs how you might move forward for the rest of the day. So just imagine that at the end of the day, if a teacher felt as though, geez, you know what, I don't know that I necessarily hit the mark on something, or I need to clarify something, well, now you have an opportunity to sort of tell students, come on back and see me, or the next morning for that matter. So we just wanted to create a little bit more space as far as that was concerned. One of the other questions that was brought up too, and I don't think this was in any way to sort of dismiss the importance of some of our special areas like phys ed or whatever, but they had said, by the middle school schedule, you're giving phys ed every other day, just like you're running your math schedule. So it's actually phys ed is every other day. If we've broken the schedule out over that, over multiple days, phys ed would be not according to that same schedule, really be essentially once every 4 days. So we're coming close to the end of our time here. I wouldn't mind taking just another question or two, Mrs. Persico.
Sure. There are some questions about the middle school schedule. and the allotment of 60 minutes as opposed to what the standard amount of time was.
Gotcha. Yep. Actually, I got one of those as well too, so I'm glad you brought it up. So again, the idea of having kids, if we ran the normal schedule, which the periods run about 39 minutes, you're going to have kids having to log on a very large number of times throughout the course of the day. And if kids have connectivity issues or for whatever reason they couldn't get on at a particular time, it's going to substantially limit their ability to jump into a class. Maybe they're only getting 20 minutes out of the class. So as opposed to doing that, giving the 60-minute window gives us some more time. Does it result ultimately, at least for those particular scheduled classes, in maybe less minutes in a given week? It potentially could, but with the extended office hours as well, I would actually suggest that our students are going to have more ability to interact with the teachers and on a more individualized basis. So, how about one more?
Incoming fourth grade students still have the opportunity to take a musical instrument.
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. So the incoming fourth grade students, that would be I'm going to say that would be our plan for now. We have to assess our capacity as far as that's concerned. So, but that would be our plan for now. Again, it goes in line with trying to maintain our programming to the extent possible. If I could just offer a little reflection here. So one of the things, as I said, I have a lot of Google Meets this week. One of the things that we're doing, and I've been working with our Teachers Association, as well as our Civil Service Employees Association to get in front of some people basically and have some communication or conversation, about some of the planning that's taking place. Last week I was able to interact with our Civil Service Employees Association and field some questions from them. Good questions. And I've done the same thing I've been meeting with individual buildings. This week, today actually, I had 3 building Google Meets. We specifically broke up some of these so that we could have some conversations that would be more specific to people's particular areas. But I will say the questions, the feedback that I'm getting is very, very focused on how do we make this work. I guess I'm saying this because I think it's so critical for people to understand that you have, again, I talk about 1,000 people, all right, who are highly dedicated to ensuring that your children have the best possible educational experience. I mean, when I talk about some of the granular level of these questions, it's because people are hungry for this. And I talk about it from a parent perspective, asking these questions that I'm reading off, but from our teachers. If you think your questions are granular, you should see some of the questions we're getting from some of our teachers and some of our support staff who want to be in this, who are in this 100%. They are here for your kids. They want to make sure that they are doing right by your children. So the level of thoroughness, the level of thinking, all the different levels that they're thinking on, to me, it's impressive. If not a little exhausting at times, because it's keeping me on my toes as well. But that's the benefit of having all these people and engaging, the people that actually have to implement this programming, to say to them, listen, hey, we need you to own your space. And they are owning their spaces. They're owning their respective spaces. They're saying, this is what I need to do my job. And they're being very explicit in a very good way. They're saying, this is the support that I need in order to be able to do it. All right, they're hungry to do their jobs. So I would like to thank, I know we're a little over our time, but I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. We have another one of these forums tomorrow night from 6 to 7 p.m. I'd like to thank Ms. Persico for being here. I'd like to thank Dr. Quinn and Mrs. McCartan for being here, and for Mr. Pacer for being here as well to help facilitate this virtually for us. Again, I appreciate all these feedbacks. I would strongly encourage you, anybody watching, keep submitting to that email address. Keep the questions coming. Tomorrow night I plan on, either if I need to expand upon some things, I will. If I need to answer new questions, I will. And this is not, again, the only communication that's coming out from us as a district. We're going to continue to communicate, right in through the school year and in the beginning of the school year. We're going to make sure that we're in constant communication. So thanks to everyone and have a great night.